Welcome back, everybody. Let's have a look at Bitcoin and Matic then, shall we? So Bitcoin's made some decent moves today, filling that gap and then promptly being bounced back above it. So a brief overview of what I expect is going to happen, similar to the way I basically said it was going to happen a few days ago. Once we broke above this level, we've got to fight against the 200 exponential moving average, basically being rejected on there in the first pass. Second time, completely overshooting it but closing just beneath it. No big surprise there. The next day coming down to test the resistance, so basically bouncing within this area, and today filling up the entire area from bottom to top. So what I'm expecting is, I don't think we're going to be making any big moves up or down at the moment. I think basically we're going to be playing within this range, 7,750 to 8,150, which is where the 200 EMA is. What I mean by that is that yes, our range of candlesticks will close within this area generally speaking, but we will have wicks above and we will have wicks below, but the wicks above will promptly be brought back down and the wicks below will promptly be brought back up. So it's an area of it's like a magnet drawing it back into this little area, but this won't last for too long. As you can see, the cloud is declining, so if we can stay within this area for a week or so, the chances of breaking out and above and staying above, and actually breaking above the 200 EMA and staying above there, is actually quite high, because this resistance cloud, which is essentially what it is, it's like a big area of resistance, will be decreasing. So the 200 EMA will be above the top of the cloud, and if we can start to close towards the top or above it, there's likelihood that we could then at that point have continuation, and then we'll be looking at other areas of resistance, which it'll be a different story, but it'll be a bit more of a bullish story at that point. The only other thing that's coming into play now with Bitcoin, before we go on to Matic that is we've got a cross coming here from the 200 simple and the 242. This usually only ever really happens in the midst of a bear market, so we had one here, and it doesn't really look anywhere near the same sort of setup, but what happened here is we found our relatively secure low, that secure low here of roughly $6,000, where we tested several times before we broke back down. Now this was a true bear market. If you believe in the 4-year cycle of Bitcoin, this was expected to happen, so this shouldn't really be anything that we measure this one on, because this is supposed to be a bull market, and so long as we haven't revisited these bottom lows, which I don't think we will, technically we're in a bull market still, even though it's extremely bearish. Although you have to bear this in mind, that this does signify a bearish move, so we'll have to see how we go from there. And like I say, when we saw this cross to the up, we did see a change of reversal in the opposite way. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. This crossed here to signify bullish moves. It pretty much crossed exactly where we reached our peak. So it's not really much to go by, to be honest with you, unless we're in a bear market. So let's not get too overexcited about that. It is a negative cross, but it's a bit of a slow mover, so let's not read too much into that, even though it is bearish. So the bottom could be in for Bitcoin. So what does this mean for other coins, and specifically Matic? Well, let's have a look then, shall we? When you look at the Matic sats, they basically aren't doing a single thing. In actual fact, we found a nice bounce here, but that's to be expected after coming down 70%. And we are going to bounce, so we bounced. But since that bounce, it's just been going down and down and down and down. It doesn't look great, and it's definitely not moving at the same speed of Bitcoin. However, when Bitcoin pulls back, it's not really bothering Matic either. So it's not showing specific signs of strength, nor is it extremely weak. It's not being brought down massive amounts. But when we look at the tether pairing, there is something quite worrying coming in. So what we'll do is we'll go back in time in a minute. So what we'll look at first, we see this and this. It's very slow moving, but it is going to happen. This basically will be a death cross, and there's nothing to suggest that there's going to be a bull move, even though we have sort of made a low here. But I'll tell you why we made that low. If we go to, was it the 12-hour? 12-hour had a negative cross here, essentially a death cross on a 12-hourly, basically falling it down to making a bottom. And then we bounced from that area because that was relatively low. So it was a buyback. That was it, a low price. So it was a decent bounce. you could say that that was the second bounce after the parabolic top. So we came down, well, you could call this the first one, right up there. There's a really big bounce. That's almost 100%. And so you'd be doubling your money if you bought back there. Revisiting that low, we found another bounce again, pretty high, essentially doubling it again. So very forgiving and generous bounces. Coming on all the way down to this level here, we bounced, but it was not very good. Obviously, it was clearly not a very strong bounce, and we're kind of finding our way now to probably find a lower low than this one. Maybe even revisit this low here. We could find a bounce here. I don't think it would hold up very well after a death cross on a daily. I think we're more likely to come down to this level here. And this is over time. This isn't immediate. Okay. The reason I'm going on the sort of the bearish rampage at the moment is let's have a look at some of these lower time frames. We'll go to the hourly. This doesn't look like a Matic chart, does it? It's very, very, very small. It's not really doing a great deal at all. We look at it. It's if anything, it's disorganized. It's messy. It's not got any structure to it. It's finding its way still. It doesn't know what it wants to do. So we'll go to a 4 hourly. What do we see? Pretty much we're going to see the same thing. We don't see hardly any volatility. We just see lots of rejections from the top. It's just spiky. It's like a bed of nails, really. So it's just completely indecisive. There's no progression here. We've got more wicks than we've got candle bodies. It's not tradable at the moment, unfortunately. It's too indecisive. When you see spiky wicks like this all over the place, it means it doesn't know what the hell it's doing, which is why I don't want to get anywhere near trading it. We go to the 12 hourly and start to look a little more constructive, but that's constructive to the downside. And clearly, obviously, we got our death cross here, which is slowly playing out. It's not much, is it? But it's negative. That's what I'm saying. It's a negative slope. Death crosses don't always mean that it's going to plummet immediately after. It just means that it's gone bearish, and it will remain bearish until you see the opposite effect take place. And we're trending beneath all the major moving averages, which is never a good thing. Even though we're plateauing, this is what I mean. It's not strong. It's not weak. The Bollinger Bands, you can't really see them very well. They're very dark here, but we're really in a very small trading range. You can just about make that out. What is this from bottom to top? We've got an area of 16%, which is small for Matic, and that level at the bottom is 1.3, well, basically 1.4 cent, and the top of this is where the 200 EMA is. That's 1.6 cent, roughly speaking. So a relatively big range for most coins, small range for Matic, and it's bearish, so we're beneath all the moving averages, basically find our way to the bottom of the Bollinger Band. We may find bounces here. I think what's likely to happen with Matic now is Sats, if Bitcoin continues to move up, and Matic doesn't want to do anything if it just stays the level it is, its Sats are going to be drained, and you might see small gains take place on the tether value, but Sats will be drained out of it. And when coins are losing Sats, it means that people are losing interest, because no one wants to buy a coin which is losing its Sats. You might as well just buy Bitcoin. It's got higher liquidity. It's making more money. That's where you want to be putting your money. So you don't want it into a coin like Matic with a bearish chart when it's losing Sats. Even though you might be earning some actual money on Tether, you'll be losing out because you could be invested in something like Bitcoin. Which is basically what I think is going to happen. Until we get this death cross, which I think has to now play out, we can't really look at trading Matic properly, because we have to wait for the death cross to play out for it to then reverse. And only when it reverses can we think about trading it again. You can't trade a coin which is looking bearish and waiting for an extremely bearish signal, one of the most bearish signals, to kick in. You're just gambling at that point. Obviously gamblers do make money, but I'm not a gambler. I couldn't put my money into this right now, but I do look at it on a daily basis, because I do know how profitable it can be to buy Matic. Trust me, I've done it twice now. I've made a lot of money out of it, which is why I look at it every single day. But at the moment, there's nothing to say it's going to do anything other than go down, or just not be as profitable as Bitcoin by any means. that's all I really got to say on it. Unfortunately, I can't really go any further with it at the moment. It's just a matter of waiting for the death cross to play out, or for some magical miracle, we find ourselves shooting way above this and bouncing upon either the green 50 or the white 200, and then of course the death cross will have been avoided. But even at that point, we have to wait to see how the consolidation of a giant move like that plays out, because you can't just make giant moves like that and expect to stay up. You're going to have to consolidate. We're going to have to see where we consolidate if that were to happen. Ideally, we'd be bouncing on the green 50. But again, that's complete theory. Reality would tell me that the opposite will happen. We're going to trend downwards and we're going to get a death cross, and we'll continue down until we find essentially a bottom. Possibly this level here, more likely one of these levels here, maybe even this low here, or perhaps maybe over time, if Matic really loses its volume and loses its interest and its sats, we will be coming down to the 1 cent level. But that might take a considerable amount of time, but it could quite easily happen. Again, I don't know a great deal about the Matic project or the fundamentals of it, if they've got anything in the pipeline, if it comes on Coinbase. All these little variables could clearly change the way that the chart looks, but going by the chart alone, it doesn't look great. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you have a nice evening. Take it easy.